So it's February 27th, the 19th, it's just where I am, 2024. And we're here at English, Indiana, at the Historical Society building in English. And we're happy to have Philip and Linda Woolems and Tammy Redding. And we're here to talk about the English mill, right?
Yep.
We want to learn all we can about it. And Philip, you remember that, right?
Well, I remember some of it going there when I was a kid. And in front of the mill, there was an old building stood there, and there was a cob building. And
Oh, what
when
kind of building?
the cob, for cob, put the corn cobs in,
cob.
store
Oh,
the
uh-huh.
corn cobs.
Uh-huh.
And when you take your ear corn in, they'd shell it, and if you didn't want it ground in there like cow feed,
Mhm.
they would put the cobs in that building, and if somebody come through and needed cow feed made, they'd have the shelled corn and mix the cobs with it and salt and,
To make the cow feed.
Make
So the
the
corn
cow
cobs were used in
yeah,
the
they
feed too.
saved it, they
Mhm.
saved it.
So the mill bought the corn from local farmers, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah,
Bought that corn, they milled it, they grind it into cow feed.
yes.
Did they also make cornmeal? Do you
Oh,
know?
yes, yes. they
Cornmeal
made-
for
They
cooking.
made cornmeal, yeah, made flour. They took the wheat and made the flour.
Well, we've got a picture here of the mill, and they're making flour right there. Do you remember anything of the mill at that time when they were making flour?
Oh, yes.
Well, tell us about it, because, you know, here's the thing. I remember the feed mill in English as a place you get feed for the animals,
Yes.
and that's it. I was surprised to find out that they produced electricity, that they made flour, so it's all new to us. Tell us all about it.
Well, I can't remember everything about it, but I know
Uh-huh.
they made the flour. Of course, when they ground the flour, they had to take the husk off of it, you know. and
Yeah.
It went into another area, and they saved it to go back into feed for animals, you know.
Huh. Do you remember when the mill made electricity?
No, I don't. I've got an old generator out there at the house that the English used back when they didn't have electricity. They had to go with another engine, an old engine. You know.
Uh-huh.
Hit and miss engine, they call them.
Oh, a hit and miss. I love those things.
Yeah.
See those at the Lanesville Heritage Festival every year. One of my favorite
Yeah,
stops.
they, Eb Roberts, he told me that many a time, well, he knew what time they were gonna shut the lights off in English, and he'd run to get home before the lights went out.
Do you know what time that was? Because
No, I
Bob was telling us about that the theater had a direct connection to the mill because the theater had lights later than the rest of town.
Yeah,
But I don't know when, I need to ask him what
I
era.
don't know.
And that was because the owners of the mill also owned the theater? Is
They
that true?
did for a period of time, yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah. Do you
Yeah.
remember Guy Longest?
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
What do you remember of Guy Longest?
I just remember him, and that's about all I can say about him.
Uh-huh.
See, I wasn't around English a lot, just going there with Grandpa, and he'd go in with a team of horses and have feed, or corn, and he'd get it made into feed, we'd come back home. And he'd talk about the old basket factory that sit across the street there from it.
Where was the basket factory?
It set, you know where the filling station is now? It set from there up to about the church where the county garage is. It was a long building, and then behind the church, you can still see it. There's a slab of concrete there, a little bigger than this table.
Mm-hmm.
And that was where the one end of the bridge sat, and the other end sat on the other side of the creek, and that's where the toilets was, where you can still see the foundation where the toilets were for the basket factory.
How interesting about that?
Oh, really? For the basket factory? Because the basket factory was on that, where the mobile station.
Yeah, and where the old kind of garage is.
And where the old county, so this is pretty big then.
Yeah, it was a long building, and I've got a thing out there in the house talking about it. I think there was, how many people was, there was a lot of people worked there.
Well, there were a lot of people that worked at the basket factory, and there was also a factory where they produced railroad cars, right? Do you remember that?
The old car factory. My grandpa said when he was I think 16 years old, he went to work there. And I said, what did you do? And he said, well, they bring the cars in there and we take the wheels off and grease them and put new bearings and whatever they needed in.
Now, is that the place along the railroad tracks that I would later I'd refer to it as the furniture factory?
Yes, that was the old,
Okay.
yeah, with the old furniture. It was right at the end. They built the furniture factory on the west end of where the old car factory was.
Mhm.
They called it the car factory where they brought the boxcars in.
Now, let me ask you about, you mentioned that you would go to the mill with your grandfather, right?
Yes.
And where did he live?
He lived out there where I was telling you about Calhoun Road. The old house still standing. That's the only thing that's still standing back in there is his old house.
So,
If you go down that lane
yeah,
and go down to, they keep a mailbox. Nobody lives down in there at all. They put in 2 new bridges. When I was a kid, we didn't have a bridge. We had to walk out to meet the school bus out on the main road because couldn't come in on account of the road. But now the county built 2 new bridges and nobody lives back there.
go figure. So it was a long trip from there to the feed mill in English.
Yes.
So tell me, what was it like, what was that whole trip like for you, being with your grandpa on the horse-drawn wagon going to English?
It was exciting.
Mhm.
And see, everybody went to English on Saturdays.
What
And,
time of the morning would you leave to get to English?
Well, usually Grandpa got up and left pretty early, you know. And,
Now, some people would say early is 9 o'clock in the morning.
No.
I don't think it was that late, was it?
no, it was more like 7 o'clock. Daylight. After
Daylight.
daylight.
So daylight, taking that wagon onto English, it must have taken a good long while to get there, right?
Well, it did take a little while,
Mhm.
yeah.
Remember how long?
No, I don't. I can't remember how long it took, but it took a while.
So when you got to English, what were the things that you and your grandpa would do?
Well, he would, he always liked to talk to different ones. We'd go, there's a hardware store set right across the creek there from the mill on the same side of the track. Jim Turley's Hardware.
Jim Turner's Hardware?
Turley.
Oh, Turley. Oh, Turley.
And the port set right, there was 2 sets of side tracks come off there. One of them come right past that porch, right past the mill. And they could get stuff from the mill off the train there, boxcars. And then they could get stuff from that hardware store. And then there's another set between that set of tracks and the railroad now. And that was the one that went up to the old car factory and picked up ties and furniture and stuff from the furniture factory.
Uh-huh.
So that Turley hardware store, was that on that little plot of ground that's just
Well,
across that?
nothing's on it now.
Nothing's on it at
Yeah,
all?
that's where it was, and they had the hitching posts for horses, and I've seen probably, I'd say probably 8 or 10 teams of horses tied there at one time. People going in there and buying their fertilizer and seeds
Okay.
and hardware and stuff. But the porch went right out, and they pulled a box car right up in front of the door there where they could just unload it on the porch.
Uh-huh. Wow. You know, it's interesting. I've never seen a picture of that kind of scene in English.
Is that
There
right?
apparently were not many pictures taken. But when you think about that, you've got all these people coming in from out of town, mostly farmers, right?
Yeah.
You've got all these teams of horses there. What did you do with what happened with the horses all day?
Well, they kept them tied like there, and they go, if they need to go over in town, they leave them there, and they go over in town. But in town, and when you come down West Fifth Street there in English, after you pass the street that going up to the courthouse,
Okay, yeah.
over on the north side of the road was a big barn. And there's a guy, he kept horses there, and they horse traded. My
Oh.
grandpa traded horses there.
Oh.
I've seen Dad buy horses there. Tiefenball, Clarence Tiefenball was his name that run the horse barn.
Right there in English.
Right there in English, and they tore it down later and built a filling station.
That was where the Shell station was. I was
Yes.
gonna ask you, is that
Yeah,
where that was?
That's where it was at, where the barn was.
Now,
No.
now, the equivalent to this, when I was growing up, I'm guessing it was like where Hanger's farm equipment
Yeah.
store was. My dad's barber shop was right there
Yeah.
in that building. But what was in that building in your earliest memories?
Well, it was the car dealer, Tip Parr sold Plymouth
Tip
cars.
Parr?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
There was 3 car dealers in English at one time. One there, one George Eastridge sold, after the war, he built that county garage. He sold international trucks and Pontiac cars. And then there at the foot of the hill where Dimbo had his feed mill, that, Esther Parks built that and sold GMC trucks and Jeep vehicles, Jeeps and Jeep trucks and stuff, and cars.
Now, where was that? Where was
That's
that?
right at the foot of the hill, just when you start up the hill.
Oh, I
Where
know, okay.
later
Where the
Dimbo
buzzards
Hatchery
all
was,
sat on the
right?
roof now.
Yeah, right, where it doesn't have any roof
Yeah,
now,
that
right.
was built, that was a
Okay.
dealership there.
I had no idea there were 3.
And I live in the house where he lived in at that time.
Uh-huh.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, when you're there in English with your grandpa, there's the horses and the wagons. Would you ever see a car?
Yeah, you'd see some, but they wasn't like they are now. A lot of people walked to
Mhm.
town, you know.
How unusual would it have been for you to see a car when you were there on a typical Saturday?
Well, they parked on Main Street. They was always cars.
There were some
Yeah,
there.
they was cars there.
How about the streets?
I remember Grandpa talking about the streets being dirt streets
Mhm.
when he was a kid. And he said there wasn't no bridges across the creek.
Oh.
And he was pushing my aunt. She was born in 1909. And he was pushing her and another little girl across there and turned the buggy over there in the creek.
Oh, my.
It's Madge Group.
Oh, Madge.
Madge
Oh,
Crook.
Madge
Madge
Crook.
Crook was in the buggy with me.
Poor Madge.
She could tell, that's the reason she was like she was.
And down,
She hit her
and
head.
down there behind Hangers was the old Liberty stable, and that's where they kept the horses back in the horse and buggy days.
Uh-huh.
And Grandpa said he would be living with his older brother down towards Sulphur. And he said the old road then was different than it is now, 37. And right past where he lived, he said them stagecoaches would come down through there and have 4 head of horses going to Old Sulphur Hotel down at Old Sulphur.
Which was a big
Hotel.
hotel,
Big
wasn't it?
hotel. I had a picture of it one time, I can't remember where it's at now.
We've
Steve
got-
and Debbie have pictures. Yeah, you have
We've
pictures.
got, there's pictures of it here too.
Yeah.
It's impressive to see.
Yeah, and he said it was on the weekends, they'd come in on the train, and people would get off and go to the hotel, right, get in the stagecoach and they haul them back and forth.
You know, you mentioned about Saturdays being a busy time in English, and English was a big, thriving town too. I remember Dad would open up, I think, at 8 o'clock and not close until 9 o'clock, and that barber shop was busy all the time. The
Yes.
street, the sidewalks, busy with people,
Theater would be going.
theater, people doing shopping.
Yeah.
Saturday, big town.
At one time, counting from up there where Parks was, through English, there was 6 places where you could buy gas in English.
6.
Yeah.
So who had that gas station first where the, was it the basket factory?
What was his name? When I was a kid, he rode a motorcycle. I can't think what his name was right now. Ed Barlow. Ed Barlow.
Ed Barlow.
Ed Barlow.
Okay. Huh,
They called him Big Ed.
big Ed.
He always rode a motorcycle.
I can see Big Ed on that
Yeah, I
motorcycle.
know.
Was Big Ed really big or was he tiny?
Well, he was big.
He was big, okay.
Yeah.
Philip, let me ask you, this is a picture of the feed mill. I always remember it with that metal sheeting on the side of it. Is that how it always was from your memory? that metal sheeting?
I can't remember, but I know when I was in high school, we caught chickens, and here at the end with them scale saws, I always weighed their chicken trucks. Weighed them in empty and weighed them out after they loaded them.
Oh, you went to the farm, the chicken houses and helped catch the chickens.
Yeah, and that's where they weighed them there. They'd weigh them out at the feed mill. That's the only scales there was around there.
I hadn't thought about that, because, you know, the Stanford farm, we were talking about that, my grandparents, they,
Yeah, I've caught chickens up there.
well, yeah, and me too, and fill those not pickup, those flatbed trucks just stacked high with chicken coops.
Yeah.
And they'd take them off and weigh it, and I guess that must have been where they were weighed.
That's where they weighed them
And the scales were right there on the end of the
right there.
building,
On the end of the
on
building.
the east side of the building. But there's still some remnants of
Yeah.
those,
Yeah,
yeah.
they are. I think they are.
Mhm.
Now,
And that would have made good sense, because they would also be weighing, corn that farmers were bringing in,
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
Yeah, when I was in high school, I got an award for, I took agriculture class, and Willis White gave it to me.
Mm-hmm.
And, what was his name?
Willis White, he owned the mill, right?
He was running it. Ray Hubank was the county agent at that time.
Ray Eubank, I remember him, his name for
He had a
sure.
big farm down there on
Yeah.
Padoka Lake, and the lake took part of it, and they moved up north of
Mhm.
Ramsey. Or not Ramsey, Orleans, and that old barn's still standing up on the farm. They tore the house down, going towards Mitchell, but the old barn's still standing.
It's there.
Yeah.
By the way, what was the award you won?
It's about the class.
Go
Oh,
ahead,
that county
Kelly.
agent was so mad that day. We went to judge, went up north, I can't remember, up close to Indianapolis, and was judging beef, dairy cows. And I judged the cow, and they gave it to one of the kids there at the school, give the award. And he was so mad, Eubank was, because he said, well, you're the one that should have got it. You done a better job than he did. And so they gave me an award when I come back.
Good for him.
What did you say this morning about the eggs?
Oh, Hanger said that if he didn't buy, he'd buy a whole truckload of eggs through the week, and then on Mondays he'd take a roll. And he said, if I didn't have a truckload of cases of eggs, of course, every farmer, raised the hens back then, to help buy the feed and stuff.
Mhm.
And he said, if I didn't have a full truckload, I'd had a bad week.
Of eggs. And those eggs came from different farmers,
All different.
right?
Yes, yes.
I remember we used to raise eggs for the hatchery in Leavenworth.
Yeah.
But I think at this point, you're talking about this farm would bring in a few dozen, that farm
Yeah.
would bring in a few dozen.
See, I think what changed things a lot in these little towns, now this is my opinion, I might be wrong, but back when I was a kid, they had the Sunday laws. You couldn't buy and sell on Sunday. The stores had to be closed on Sunday.
Mhm.
And everybody would go to town on Saturdays to do some shopping, Saturday night, and they'd go to the theater
Mhm.
and the mill, whatever they had to do on Saturday, that was a big day.
It was a huge day, and then Sunday was Sunday.
Sunday.
Church,
Yeah.
family,
Yeah, yeah.
and the local neighborhood.
So he said when they started opening stores on Sunday, these little towns started going because everybody wanted to go to the big towns to shop.
Mm.
Yeah, they built the roads around the town, just like English, the road come right through the main part of town.
Right.
64, they went through Marengo, Milltown, and then they built around them and built the town.
Right.
So, you know, if our grandkids, we're telling our grandkids, oh, I remember English where I grew up used to have a mill. What would you like those grandkids to know about the English mill?
Well, it was a very important place when I was a kid, very important. Everybody went to the mill because they had no other way of getting their feed right, no other way. And
So it was
so
very important.
It was important. Then they, in later years, there in English, they tore the old cob mill, shed out, and then they went to sell tractors and farm machinery. You remember that?
Mm-hmm, yeah. That was, but they hadn't done that originally, right?
No,
That equipment was
no,
later.
they didn't.
Well, because the farmers were generally using horses anyhow at that
Yes,
point, right?
yes.
Earlier
Of
on.
course, they had the old hub factory up there in that end of town where they made the wagon wheels and the wagon hubs. Now I've got one of the old hubs out there at the house somewhere around there. They come
I
from
didn't
that
know
old.
about that.
Yeah.
They made hubs and
Yes,
wagon
and
wheels?
behind, head up, just, you know where the old lumber yard used to be? Behind it was a hub factory, and they built wagon hubs. And they hauled beech, they bought beech trees all over the area around there. That's what they made the hubs out of, was beech.
Really?
Yeah.
I've never heard of using beech. Why did they use beech?
I don't know why. I guess they helped together better. Of course, they put the bands around them to help hold them, but,
Well, that's interesting, because now kind of the foresters will tell you, like, you beech trees they're not really worth anything, right?
they were
But
very.
there's lots of beech woods around
They
here.
were
so-
very important. I've heard my grandpa and different one talk about how far out in the country they go to get them, you know.
Really?
All back on wagons and horses to make the hubs.
Well, but you know, part of the reason why the mill was so important was that the life of a typical family in Crawford County was really different.
Every farmer had to go there to get their corn ground. They didn't grind it no other way, only there.
And they grew their own corn, right?
Yes, they grew it, and then when they cut it, if they wanted to, they would cut it before the corn was ripe, and let it ripen in the shocks, and you've seen the corn shocks.
Mm-hmm.
Then they could sow their wheat, their winter crops, wheat, barley, or what, oats, or whatever they want. They go ahead and get them started, and then they brought in the old the old corn shredders,
Mhm.
and they run the fodder through it and blew the fodder in the barn, and they had the ears, and then they take the ears to the mill and get them ground.
And
So they cut, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So that's interesting, so they cut their corn early,
Cut it early while it was still green.
while still green, so that
It's
they,
just like hay, and they could feed it then to the livestock, the fodder.
the fodder they
Yeah,
fed.
they
So they
feed
fed
it.
the fodder to the livestock.
Yes, they plugged it and fed it.
would the corns of, when they cut that corn, the corn stalks, make those shocks, was the corn itself still soft?
It was still soft, yeah.
Okay, and so it dried out and hardened.
It dried while they had it in the shocks.
I didn't either, so that's interesting, because then that,
'Cause
other bit, I guess that's why, because they had to get their other crop in,
Yeah, yeah.
otherwise it would get
And it would
too,
help the soil.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
And then so if they decided to grow wheat as their winter crop, they'd sow the wheat in the fall time.
Yeah, after they cut the corn,
Cut
they
the
go
corn,
ahead and sow the wheat
sow the
before, and they'd get started for winter, you know, start growing for winter.
And then they could harvest that wheat in the spring before they had to plant that corn.
And like a lot of the old farmers back then, when they planted their corn, they put pumpkin seeds in the corn box, and they'd drop them pumpkin seeds while they're dropping the corn.
Mhm.
And then they'd have the pumpkins in the fields, and they'd put the pumpkins in them corn shocks so they wouldn't freeze. And
Ah.
then when they picked up the corn, they'd get the pumpkins in and take them, feed them to their livestock.
Really? So they grew corn and pumpkins all at the same time?
They did, a lot of them did, yes. A
And
lot of them out in
pumpkins?
our area did, yes.
The pumpkins and the
That's
corn.
surprising.
See,
Yeah.
we think
Right.
of life being simple and the people being simple, but I tell you what,
Oh.
people living those days,
Oh,
smart,
yes.
figured things out. Really.
Creative, very, I mean,
Creative.
like, yeah. So they covered those pumpkins with their shocks. till
They had a little
Put 'em
wheat
in the
drill
middle, and then
that,
they put the-
they called it a one-horse wheat drill, and they could even drill between the corn rows, because they planted the corn farther apart than they do now. They could go ahead sometimes and drill plant their wheat before they cut their corn.
Ah,
And that wheat, when they harvested that wheat, where would they sell it? What would be done with it?
Well, they could sell it to other mills,
Mhm.
and then they process it, you know, to the cities where they didn't have the I hauled the grain all the way down towards Evansville, to mill down that way.
but before that, they could mill it in English.
Yes, Yeah.
But then when, do you know
After
about
they
when they stopped milling
Well,
flour?
the last fellow there was Ralph Harvey, and Linda, do you know what year it closed it?
I don't- He's the one that it closed with
Yes.
him running.
It closed when he was running it, and I bought an old U.S. Army World War I saddle off for him just before he closed it, and it's hanging out there in the building.
Mhm.
But now they weren't milling flour at that point.
He was
Then-
buying dog feed, cat food, and you could go in there and buy it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
different kind
Hardy,
yeah.
Yeah.
it wasn't.
But do you know
operating.
when they stopped milling flour there though?
No, well, probably about the same time that they closed the mill. I'd say they did it right up till they closed the mill.
Do you have any history on that?
Now, there's one guy that run that. Of course, Bursa Wright run it there for a little while before Ralph Harvey did. And there was another guy that lived out at Redwood, and I didn't know him, but I shouldn't say this when I'm talking.
They can cut it out.
They cut it out. But the women would go in there and buy feed sacks to make their clothes with, you know,
Uh-huh.
dresses and what
Yeah.
have you.
Yeah.
They'd go in there and pick out their prints.
Mhm.
And just one time I went there with my grandma to pick out the sack she wanted and help her, you know, and I loaded it in the car. And they'd come out with a checkerboard pattern on the
Yeah.
feed sacks.
Mhm.
And he was a big guy, and he said, you know, I'm gonna get one of them, take it home, have my wife make me a pair of shorts so I can bend over and the kids could play checkers.
And yet, and that's another reason why the feed mill was important to the wives too, and the whole family.
Yeah.
There was the cloth.
Curtains,
Yeah,
bulbs.
yeah, that was important.
But I never thought about this. I usually thought of like grandma buying wheat or flour or something in this feed bag that has the pattern and then using the bag after it was empty. But did they also just sell the bags empty?
No, they'd have feed in it.
Okay.
Yeah, they'd have feed in it.
So you might buy your feed depending on what pattern it
Yeah,
had. You know?
yeah.
I like that.
Wow.
Yeah, like chick starter, see, you know, you started them with a little different feeds, you know, and they'd usually be like chick starter or something in these bags.
Oh, I see. Kind of more specialty kind of
Yes,
feed.
yes.
Philip, I know it's different, but the story about the shooting at English, the guy came in the day before Christmas.
Oh, yeah, that was a sad story. He brought his kids at Christmas to buy their some apples and oranges, and he lived out past where I lived, where I was raised. Head out towards Sorcerer's Corner back in the country there. And he went to the tavern sat down there at the end of the bridge, you know.
Yeah.
Near the railroad track.
And he went over in there, and him and the guy got into it. And he come out, he went and got the apple and orange and blue wagon. He had three of the small, older kids in the wagon with him. And we had some more little kids at home. And he went in there and they got into it and the guy shot him. He come on the street and fell over dead.
Mhm.
And he said, I dare anybody to cover him up. The guy just killed him. And my great uncle was coming up the street and he saw him. And he said there was a guy come out down there in the fence. Come out down there with a bank out of the building and had a sheet over his arm and a pistol in his hand. And he walked over and covered him over.
Mhm.
And they took him, went to court, and they asked the guys that was in the tavern there, said, did you see it? And he said, yes. And he said, what'd you do? And he said, I cut my suspenders and went up through the ceiling. And they sent him up for line, and the guy had done the shooting, he got out of it.
Oh, my goodness.
And my grandpa told me that.
Wow.
Do you know the name of the person that got shot?
Yeah, his name was Jimmy Roll.
Jimmy what?
Roll.
Roll? Jimmy Roll.
Yeah.
Wow. Do you know who shot him?
I can't remember now. I used to know, but I can't remember now.
So, tell us, thinking again from the grandkids' perspective, what would you tell them about how life was different and how was life the same?
It was different, but it was enjoyable, you know, we grew up that way, and that was the way of life.
Phillips always said that people would say Cheryl raised his boys good. And Phillips said, we did not go to town like all the other kids. He said, when we got home from school, we fed the chickens and cows and got them out of the pasture and kept busy. And then you went in and had to eat. His mom would have food. So
We got
kids
up-
today, they don't have the
We got up
responsibility.
at 3:30 in the morning, milked the cows, fed the chickens, fed the hogs, and got ready to go to school. You didn't get up, you didn't lay in bed back then.
3:30
And
in
when night come, you went to bed.
Right, because you were tired.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk just a little bit about this. I've got a question. So you get up at 3:30 to milk the cows.
Yeah, because a milkman come at 5, so it had to be.
Had to be done
Had to be separated.
before, and separate the cream
Well,
with the hand
it's
separate.
you strained the milk, you didn't
Oh,
separate.
strain, okay.
Yeah, back then we just sold it all.
So get that milk, cow's milk and corn, or the cow, milk ready to get to the milkman, and then probably breakfast,
Yes,
and then you're getting ready to go to school.
that's right.
And might have some other chores like feeding the cows, the pigs, the chickens, all that stuff, right?
Yeah, we was doing all that, we had to get all that done. Yeah.
Now, if it's a school day, tell us a little bit about what was your school like, and how
Well,
long was it?
I went to a one-room school, it's still standing where the old number 10 school.
I've seen that saved.
And there was 8 grades in that school, and the year we started, there was 51 kids in school, counting all 8 grades. And there's-
51 kids,
and
all
there's
in one
13
room.
There's 13 of us in the first grade that year.
Uh-huh.
And can you imagine the teacher now handling that many? But you know what
One
was good
teacher?
about it? When you sit back there in your chair, of course, the little kids sat in front row, and then as you went back to the school, the seats got bigger, more room. And, but you listened to what the teacher was teaching the kids ahead of you. And you know, when you got to the next class, you knew a lot what was gonna happen because you heard it taught before. And it was good.
And there was just one teacher here, right?
One teacher.
51 kids here. Like, okay, now, what was your school day like? Did you have recess? Did you have lunch?
We had a recess, we had the outside, John's outside.
Mhm.
And if you need to go, you have your hand up, and the teacher give you permission, there's only one person could go at a time.
Mhm.
That way there wasn't no business going on, you went out and you come back. And you heated it with an old wood stove.
Water.
And the kids carried the wood in, and we carried water from the spring down the road, and there was 2 of us, and they'd take a bucket on a pole, the kid on each end of the pole carrying a bucket from the spring,
Mhm.
and that was our water. We didn't have no well, nothing on the school drink.
And about when would school let out for you?
It was let out just before the bus would drop us off, then it'd go ahead into English with the high school kids.
Mhm.
And then the school would let out when the bus come back, be around 4 o'clock.
Now, what was your life
We-
like when you got back home? What did you do then?
Well, that's when we went to get the cows in and start feeding hogs and feeding chickens,
Mhm.
getting the cows and horses fed.
And then you'd have dinner, I guess,
Yeah, yes.
and
Then you get your lessons with an old coal oil lamp and then go to bed. We didn't have electric. I was 13 years old before we ever got electric.
how old were you again?
13.
13?
Yeah.
Got electric.
They brought electric through there. There was no electric. There was 4 houses down that road, no electric in India.
To make a little extra money, he trapped
Trapped. Yeah.
the skunk.
One time, I was trapping under a bluff, and the trap was pulled up on there, and I went over, I told Mom, I said, I'm gonna run, look, check my track before the school bus gets here. School buses started coming in then. And I went over there, and the trap was pulled back in there, and it had it tied on the bush, so if I caught a rabbit or something, I could find him. And, laid down my belly and pulled that rabbit out, and there's a skunk, and he filled my face full.
Oh, my, oh, my.
I tried to clean up, and I went to school. Glenn Hanger was the teacher.
Oh, was it?
And Glenn laughed, and he said, you know, I got in the same mess one time going to school. Said I was teaching school, and said I was running the trap, walking through the wood, trap line through the woods as I went to teach. And said I got sprayed, and I had to teach all day with spray on me.
Oh, my.
Good story. Glenn
Wow.
Hanger was my fifth grade
Yeah,
teacher.
mine too. Right. Wow.
You was asking earlier what his grandkids, I think his grandson, he can't fathom what school, working, it just, he can't see it.
Mhm.
He's
It was
32 now.
It was so much different back then.
What did you take for lunch?
I took biscuits and usually always took peanut butter and jelly.
Peanut
On
butter
one
and jelly.
biscuit, another biscuit would have a piece of meat on it. If we had meat, we'd have meat on it, that was it. And there was one family, there was three kids come there, there were more kids in the family, but there was three there, the older ones when I went to school. And they brought a sweet potato wrapped in a regular newspaper, tied up with a sugar string, and that's what they eat every day. All three kids, every day, that's what they had, was a baked sweet potato. But you know, they had a lot of, sweet potatoes got a lot of protein and stuff in it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of food, what was your typical breakfast?
Well, there's always biscuits and gravy, always.
Well,
Oh,
You
Love
said your
that.
mother, the only time she didn't make breakfast.
Baked biscuits is when one of us kids was born. She said, she told me later, said that's the only time I didn't make biscuits is when one of your kids was born.
every day making this.
Every day. When we went home at night, we know there'd be beans and potatoes and cornbread.
for dinner.
That's right.
By the way, how were those potatoes made? How did your mom make those potatoes?
Well, she just boiled them and cut them up. And when, on Sundays or something, we'd have mashed potatoes, and she'd always make a cake, but through the week, unless it was her birthday, and she'd make a little, like a big muffin or something, put a candle on it, and that was her birthday cake.
Mm-hmm.
And at Easter, he said she would say, tell Charlotte and Philip, the Easter Bunny's been here, go and see what he left. And she would go out there and hide the eggs.
And Easter flowers.
All right, okay.
She was
Yeah.
older, you know, back then, I mean, I don't remember my mom doing that, but she was always so good to them kids. It was her
She
life.
was.
What a great mother.
Yeah, she always made sure we had plenty to eat.
What was your mother's name?
Alma,
Alma?
She was
What was her
Beasley.
maiden name?
Beasley.
Beasley.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she was raised out there, like I told you, her dad was raised up where the old courthouse was.
I bet she obviously loved her kids. She probably had high expectations of her kids too, right?
Yes, she did. And she only told you one time to do something. The next time, you failed it.
What do you
I
say?
said,
when
Dad
you're-
he built a house in the woods and Mom trimmed the bushes.
That's what my dad said. There's 3 boys and 2 girls, and they had a lilac bush. And he said by the end of summer, that lilac bush was pretty much just broke down.
Yeah, they only told you one time.
But you know, being raised in back then, we were better off than the kids today
Oh, yeah.
How do you think so?
because we were taught to respect family, the neighbors, property. I mean, my dad, he would take us out in the country mushroom hunting, and he had, a fence was going down, somebody had climbed over it and broke it down. He would put a staple through there. He said, respect people's property. And I think that's how kids today are not. They don't realize how important, and a mother and a father raising them. And Dad was strict.
And having a mother and father. I mean, being part of a family was the norm then, and it was such a blessing to everybody involved.
I think we all were raised with parents that hard workers, and they, the the rules were there.
And, and I know that families here in this area didn't have a whole lot, I mean, but nobody did, so that was
Right.
sort of the
That's right.
equalizer, and we were happy with that, but didn't have a lot, and you really had to be careful and work hard. I think of getting up at 3:30 in the morning and working until I finished my homework by coal oil lamp, and then going to bed when I was tired, ready to go to bed.
Yeah, right.
Well, that builds character and a life and an outlook that is a real blessing to generations in your case, because you're still in, see, these stories will influence people too, and we appreciate that.
Now, Orleans Camp was celebrating, and Roger Dillman came down and interviewed him like you are now. And they showed that at the Tabernacle when they celebrated I can't remember how many years, but anyhow, they said people really enjoyed hearing how he, as a young boy, helped put benches in the Tabernacle and
It was 70 years.
70 years.
Oh, you helped build that.
Well,
Well,
somebody else, but they had, like his
We had
dad and
six-
different farmers.
We had there were 6 trucks in there one time unloading sawdust when they got ready to open it, they had a sawdust broker.
Uh-huh.
And there were 6 trucks in there one time, and we was hauling sawdust from French Lick up there, and they was hauling from different mills, you know. Then they left me there to help carry the benches in, and I wouldn't. Let's see, I guess I'd been about 13 years old, and boy, that was a job.
We would love to see that film too.
Yeah.
And you know, you might enjoy, Roger Dillman's going to be here in April to talk about dentistry and medicine in the old days.
Roger's my brother-in-law, married his sister, my first wife.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Got married in 50, we married in 56, and she died in 75.
There, you drove my school bus, and now I find out that, you know, and Roger, he took care of Sherry and our kids when we were young and fairly newly married.
Yeah. I got married there in the house out there where Roger was raised.
What was Roger doing when you got married?
He was laying there at the table shooting it with a cap gun.
And you got married at their house?
Yeah.
So where did he grow up?
He grew up out there, you know.
Kirby.
Out there towards Kirby.
Towards Kirby,
Yeah, back a lane there.
Okay. So
Well-
your wife lived until 75, your first
Yeah,
wife?
yeah.
Okay, I
She
didn't
had,
know how.
she went in, she was having problems, she went in the hospital, and that morning, had 2 kids, one was Rhonda was 13, Brent was 10, and she said, I love living here, but won't be back. And I said, oh, you will. I said, everything gonna work perfect. Well, she went in the hospital,
She was going for a hysterectomy
and
Uh-huh.
she turned to pick up her satchel and lost her balance.
at
She
the
was
hospital.
at the hospital and broke a bone in her foot. And a week later, she died from a blood clot.
Oh my goodness. Wow. I knew it was something tragic, but if Rhonda was 13, I was probably 11 or 12, real 10 or 11 maybe. And I couldn't put it all together. I didn't realize it was Roger's sister until just somebody told me the other day, and I was like, oh yeah, okay, it's kind of coming back. But when you're that age, you don't.
It's not important.
Well, I knew something bad had happened in Rhonda's life. I knew that, but I couldn't really put my finger on exactly. I knew it was something to do with her mother. That's all. But I just, didn't remember when or how.
And one of the things in the scrapbook, it was talking about Charlotte dying, Philip's brother, and in February, and 5 years later, then Darlene passed
Oh wow.
in February on his birthday.
Oh wow. So you only had one brother?
No, I got
Joe.
Joe, oh.
He's 7.5 years younger than me, but
He's got Alzheimer's.
he's bedfast.
Oh no.
Mhm.
Wow. Oh, that's sad.
And Susan, don't forget
So
Susan.
I
Oh,
just
Susan.
think
Oh,
the good
yeah.
Lord,
Okay.
I'm still going.
And going strong.
Well, I'm trying to.
Now, I know, but he gives the Lord the praise for him being here. He thanks him every day for letting him have another day to
Every one of those
worship.
blessings.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, 86.
Well, I guess I'm feeling compelled then to ask, what's the key to living long and well?
Well, we still get up early, go to bed early.
Now, Philip, when you go to the doctor, do you drink, do you smoke? They always ask those questions.
Never did.
And never did. I can't believe you never drink or smoke, they'll say.
Oh,
No, never did.
yeah. And Susan is your sister too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
She's the one that got by with everything.
She's 20 years younger than me.
I was gonna say, how
The
much,
youngest child.
what's the difference?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So
That-
20 years, oh, wow.
Well, let me ask you, are there any other stories related to the mill or English that you'd like to share here?
I laid in bed at it here a while back one night and counted. And when I was growing up, I counted 75 businesses, and the next time I counted 76 businesses in English when I was growing up.
Wow.
That's just hard to imagine.
There was 3 new car dealers, there was 3 tractor dealers. You could buy a tractor at the old mill, sold what they call the cock shop. And they sold internationals up at George Eastridge's, up where the county garage is, and over Hanger sold John Deere's over there. So there's 3 car dealers and 3 implement dealers in English when I grew up.
And the mill was busy, and it had flour and
Yes.
cornmeal, and plus all the feed for your animals.
Dad bought, in 53, he bought a side delivery right there, because he bought a hay baler and we was baling hay.
Okay.
Mhm. Well, great. Hey, thank you. Oh,
Now,
go
one
ahead.
more. Do you remember when Farm Bureau took over the mill? When it became a co-op?
I remember, but I can't tell you what year she was.
Okay, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I was around then.
Well,
It was always important, as that mill was. We was there every week. Either with my grandpa or dad or somebody, we was there every week, because it was important.
I think the mill, it was so important, and then all at once, it wasn't needed.
Well, what it was, farmers went to buy their own mixer, mixing their feed, and that's what happened.
See, I
And they
remember
got the
them.
combines to shell the corn.
mhm.
And see, when I was a kid, like I said, they didn't do that.
Now, I remember Marengo's mill there. I can remember the smell. It had a different smell in there.
Mhm.
And the floor was kind of wore. It was, my dad would go over there. My mom had pigs and cows and chickens. But I remember going in there and just that smell.
But they'd
Just the
always
smell
pack-
of the feeds and the grinding and the floors that have
floor
been
was
worn
worn.
from so much use.
Traffic.
That's right. And I remember all the big belts. I can just see them here.
Well, that, we
Big
just,
pulleys and all the belts that powered it, you know.
when you walked in the mill, what did you see? What did you see, what did it look like?
Well, it's just a big open place, like I said, but they had all them big pulleys and belts and stuff running where they were grinding, you know, and it always fascinated the kids, you know, to see all that.
Mhm. Oh, and then I do remember the office in the back side of the mill. That's where they had the scale head, I think, where they
Yes.
measured the weights on the trucks. But I remember paying bills there, and they had some things that you'd buy for the farm, whether it was,
Now, was that on the main floor or upstairs?
it's the main floor,
The
wasn't it?
main floor upstairs, and mostly just, that's where a lot of the pipes and the pulleys and all that stuff was.
You didn't really go upstairs?
No, we didn't go upstairs.
I was gonna say, I didn't ever remember going up there either, but.
Well, I think it's important to have history down, because the churches, you don't see them, the little churches out, the Dillman Church, and it's falling down. And it's just important for history to be wrote down.
Well, just like up there, when they tore the old courthouse down, I remember that so well.
Do you?
And Purcell, my brother, see, my first wife, her sister married Purcell, right?
Okay.
Her house did, you know. And when they started getting ready to tear the old courthouse down, see, that's when my first wife and me, we bought a marriage license in the old courthouse. And they went tearing it down, they dug a big hole back there, and they went to dumping a lot of records and old books and stuff.
Oh.
And I seen in there, I picked up some old records, and one of them went back to the 1800s. And it's where my great-grandfather had put a fence across the county road up there to lay his cows back and forth. It had a gap across it. And they got after him and told me he couldn't have a gap across it. He had to, because, see, that was the main road when that courthouse was built, the main road.
So where was the
come
old
down.
courthouse exactly?
Where the one up on the hill. They
Oh,
tore
where
it
that
down.
same place, in that same
Where
place?
they tore down that.
Okay.
Show a picture of that, show her a picture of the old.
My dad worked for this, they built homes, and they tore the old courthouse down.
And it was such a
one of the-
fancy building.
That's
And
what, when you see
they
pictures of it, you
they
can't
built
believe
the new
it.
one too.
And then they built that ugly thing.
My dad said when they put that cornerstone in the year it was built, he put some money in behind it, he told me.
Uh-huh.
And I said, if they ever tear it down, I'd like to see
If
what
it's
he
there.
put in there.
It's there.
My
Yeah.
grandpa, my great-grandpa, now I don't remember him, he died when, he was 100 when he died, and he died 2 years before I was born. But they always said that he went on the wagons that went down to Leavenworth to help bring the records up. There were 6 wagons, and he was on one of them, and they took their guns in case they had to have, got into trouble, but they didn't have trouble. And if you remember, there's an old sign there at Leavenworth says, when English stole their courthouse.
Yeah.
And so now you can go to the annex, and you remember I was telling you about those old books that went back as far as the Mount Sterling Courthouse.
Yeah.
Those books were on the wagons,
Yeah.
being hauled to English,
Wow.
stolen from Leavenworth.
Isn't that
Yeah.
cool?
Yeah.
It
That
is.
is so cool.
It is. All of this is, and we need to at least
Yeah.
wrap up the
Yeah.
formal section here. But Philip and Linda, thanks for sharing this
Yeah.
history. Because you're right, it's just like a time machine, and it's great to capture it. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
You know, people his age